Okay, once you've chosen a printer that you know is not being used and is ready to print on, we've clicked on that printer. Okay, we've also gone to the monitor tab and we've seen if it's connected, and if it's not, we've connected it with the connect button. Okay, now we're ready to go ahead and load our project. We'll come over to the prepare tab and click on that. And up here, there's multiple ways to load a file, but there's a folder here you can open. Most of you will have access to the stem drop folder and you can transfer files in and out of that folder. But here I've got a few that are loaded in here and we'll just pull one out. So we're gonna just click on this STL file and click open, and that's automatically gonna place it on our bed. You can use the controls on the top ribbon to change views if you need to see a different view. To move something on the print bed, you can left click on it and drag it around like this. If we want to change our view, we can right click our mouse and move around. That will pan our different views. We can also scroll in and out using the scroll wheel. Now, if we get to a position where we've scrolled in and we can't see it, we want to center it, we can click Shift and right click and drag your mouse. Shift, right click and drag, and that will recenter it for you. Now there's some controls on the sides we're going to use. We can click on the move if we need to move the object around. That'll just allow you to, like we showed before, click and drag. And then there is a scale and a rotate. Now, the rotate feature is nice because that allows us to choose the orientation that our project will be printed in. You can see this has a hole in it. And so I don't want to print it this way or else it'll have nothing to print on. I actually want to flip it onto this flat side. And so I'm going to come up on the red or X axis and rotate that 90 degrees. And actually, if we rotate it 90 degrees, it's going to flip it the wrong side. And so we can come up and change that to -90, or I could have just put 270 either way. So you can do that on any axis. You can rotate it so your project is oriented the way that you want it to print. The red on the bottom indicates that the project is touching the print bed, and that's really important when we're printing. A final feature we can use on this menu is the scaling feature. That'll allow us to scale our project up or down proportionally on all axes. So you can see it's 100% right now. I can go up and change, and let's say I just want to print it smaller, so I type in 50% the size. And then if I have the scaling on there, it'll change everything proportionately. So now you can see I have a smaller scale size of my model. Maybe I want to print that for just a rough draft and I don't want to use as much filament, but I want to see what it's going to print like. Now there's some other features on the sidebar. We're not really going to use these at all. Let's just talk about some of the settings. First of all, for the category, you don't need to change anything there. For the material, most of the time, you're going to be clicking on PLA verbatim. That seems to be the best settings, even though we're not using verbatim PLA, that seems to be the best settings. The profile is typically going to be high speed or standard. You don't really need to do high detail unless you're working on a really important project. Okay. Now, there's in the print setup, there's a lot of different settings we can change. The infill is how much material gets put inside of the shell of your project to support everything else. And the generate support is if you ever have any overhangs, that will generate support because the printer can't print over nothing. So if you have overhangs or holes, those kinds of things, where the printer is going to have to print above those empty spaces, you'll have to generate support here. And that will depend on several features. Most of the time, we'll just go ahead and use the recommended settings. We'll probably always use about 20% infill. There is no need to go higher than that unless you have very specific needs for your project. Don't worry about enable gradual, we'll leave that. Generate support, we typically leave on. For the build plate adhesion, there's a couple of choices here. Typically, we choose skirt, and all that does is put a small skirt, I'll show you here, around the edge of the project. It's placed a small skirt around the edge of the project. That really does nothing except for make sure that the filament is extruding correctly. Now, if you have a very small surface area project that's not going to adhere to the bed, you might want to do a brim, which is actually going to, you'll see here, make a connection so it increases the surface area. Or if you have a very small project, you may want to create a raft, which is a lot of support. Most of the time, you won't need to use that, only in special circumstances where you have very little material touching the bed on the initial first few layers. Okay, so most of the time, a skirt will be fine, but work with your teacher to help you figure out what's going to be best. Now that we have the project oriented the way that we want, we are going to go over here and click on print via USB. That'll bring up that button, and you can click that button and your print should start.